Maria Torres was a single mother who worked the night shift as a janitor at a Navy training base in Virginia. Every night, when most people went home to sleep, she put on her worn-out uniform, tied her hair into a neat bun, and quietly made her way through the wide, echoing halls of the base. The smell of metal, fuel, and salt water filled the air as she pushed her cleaning cart through the long corridors. The place was always half awake. Soldiers moving in and out, lights flickering in offices, the distant sound of helicopters on the landing pad. But no one really noticed her. To most, Maria was invisible, just the cleaning lady doing her job in silence. Yet there was something different about her. Her movements were precise, smooth, almost military. She didn't drag her feet or slouch. When she swept or mopped, she did it like it was a mission. Focused, alert, and efficient. She didn't talk much, only nodding politely if someone greeted her. Many thought she was shy, but if you looked closely, you'd see something else in her eyes: discipline, patience, and a kind of quiet strength that most people on that base didn't have. Maria had been working there for nearly 2 years. She took the job because it paid the bills, gave her health benefits, and let her spend time with her 10-year-old son during the day. Her small apartment wasn't fancy, but it was filled with warmth and laughter. Every morning, after finishing her shift, she would pick up her son from school, help him with homework, and tell him bedtime stories about brave heroes who saved lives and never gave up. He didn't know that many of those stories were real, and that his mother had lived them. No one on the base knew much about her past. They only saw a quiet woman who seemed to know her way around military spaces a little too well. When drills sounded suddenly, she didn't flinch like most civilians. When officers rushed by shouting commands, she automatically stepped aside and stood at attention, out of habit. A few noticed these small things. Some joked, "That janitor moves like she's one of us." But they always said it with a laugh, never realizing how close to the truth they were. Late at night, when the halls were empty, Maria often stopped for a moment to look at the photos hanging on the walls. They were pictures of SEAL teams, men and women in uniform, smiling after dangerous missions, medals pinned to their chests. Her gaze would linger a little longer on one specific frame, where a younger version of her stood in full combat gear, face half hidden by night goggles. No one knew that was her. The nameplate below didn't even mention her name. It was classified under Special Operations Support. She would stare for a few seconds, then smile faintly and move on, returning to her mop and bucket like nothing had happened. Sometimes, she missed that life. The adrenaline, the teamwork, the purpose. But then she would think of her son and remember why she left. The missions had taken too much from her already. Her husband, also a Navy officer, had died in an operation overseas. After his death, Maria couldn't bear to stay in active service. She promised herself that her son would grow up safe, far from the dangers she had faced. Becoming a janitor wasn't a step down for her. It was a way to stay connected to the world she once knew while protecting the person she loved most. The sailors on base often crossed paths with her but never really looked twice. To them, she was just Miss Torres, the lady with kind eyes and a quiet smile who somehow kept the floors spotless no matter how many muddy boots marched across them. But some nights, new recruits whispered strange things. "Did you see how she moves?" one would say. "She's got that SEAL walk." Another would laugh and answer, "Yeah, right. What's next? She's a secret agent?" And they'd all chuckle before moving on, never knowing how close they were to the truth. Maria didn't mind the whispers. She preferred it that way. She didn't need anyone to know who she used to be. Her satisfaction came from simple things now: the smell of freshly cleaned floors, the sound of her son's laughter when she came home, the quiet peace she felt knowing she had survived things most people couldn't imagine. But deep down, there was always a part of her that never truly left the field. Every sound, every sudden movement, every flicker of light in the hallway caught her attention. Her instincts were still sharp, like a wolf that never forgot how to hunt. And though she kept her past buried deep, there were nights when she found herself standing by the base windows, staring out at the distant ocean, feeling the pull of the life she had walked away from. She thought no one would ever recognize her again. No one would connect the quiet janitor with the legendary operator, once known by her call sign, Night Viper. The military world had moved on, and so had she. Or at least that's what she believed. But fate has a strange way of bringing the past back when you least expect it. And for Maria Torres, that moment was coming soon. It would start with a simple question, one that was meant as a joke. And by the time the night ended, even the most powerful man on the base, Admiral Jacob Steele himself, would look at her in a way no one ever had before, not as a janitor, but as the hero she had always been. That night, as the hum of engines filled the air and the clock struck midnight, Maria kept cleaning, unaware that her quiet world was about to change forever. As the days went by, people on the Navy base started to notice small, strange things about Maria Torres. She was still the same quiet janitor who worked hard every night, but there was something about her that didn't fit the usual picture of a cleaning lady. She moved too smoothly, too carefully, like someone trained to notice every detail. She never seemed tired, no matter how late her shift ran. And whenever something unexpected happened, a loud alarm, a drop tool, or the sudden bark of an officer's order, Maria didn't flinch. She stayed calm, steady, and aware. Some of the younger sailors began whispering about her. They couldn't help it. Every night, they saw her walking down the hallways, her mop and bucket moving silently beside her, her back straight, her eyes alert. "You ever notice how that janitor walks?" one recruit said to another. "Like she's on patrol." His friend laughed. "Man, she's just cleaning floors." But even as they laughed, they kept watching. There was something about her that didn't make sense. Rumors slowly began to spread. One person said Maria used to be a Marine. Another swore they saw a tattoo on her wrist that looked like a Special Forces emblem. A third claimed she once gave first aid to an injured recruit faster and better than the medic. No one had proof. It was just talk. The kind of quiet gossip that fills military bases during long, boring nights. Still, everyone could agree on one thing. Maria wasn't just some ordinary janitor. Maria, of course, heard some of the whispers. She didn't react. She had learned long ago that staying silent was the best way to protect herself. The less people knew, the safer her life remained. Sometimes she wanted to laugh at their guesses. If they only knew the truth, they wouldn't be whispering. They'd be standing at attention. But those days were gone now. The Navy life she once knew belonged to another version of her. A version buried under loss and pain. Every evening, she arrived at the base just before sunset. She would tie her hair up neatly, tuck in her shirt, and start her rounds. The soldiers changed shifts while she cleaned, and most of them barely noticed her pass by. But every once in a while, someone new would stop and watch, puzzled by the sharp focus in her eyes. "Weird," one officer muttered. "She walks like she's clearing a room, not cleaning it." Another replied, "Old habits die hard. Maybe she was a cop or something." They shrugged and went back to their work. But there was one thing everyone noticed. Maria always knew when something was off. Once, a recruit accidentally left a security door slightly open. Before the cameras caught it, Maria had already noticed and closed it, locking it properly. Another time, a group of officers were struggling to lift a heavy crate, and she quietly stepped in, helping them with surprising strength. One of them joked, "You sure you're a janitor? You lift like a seal." Maria just smiled faintly and said, "Old muscles, sir," before walking away. Her quiet nature only made people more curious. She never talked about her family, though some had seen a small photo in her locker. A young boy with bright eyes and a wide smile. "That must be her kid," someone said once. "She's probably doing this job for him." They were right about that, but they had no idea how much she had already sacrificed for her son. One night, as Maria cleaned the training hall, two officers were talking nearby. They didn't know she could hear them. "You ever hear the story about Night Viper?" one asked. The other nodded. "Yeah, that's the female operator who saved an entire SEAL team overseas, right? She disappeared after her husband died." The first officer sighed. "Yeah, shame what happened. She was a legend." Maria froze for a split second. She didn't turn her head or stop moving, but inside, her heart gave a painful twist. It had been years since she'd heard that name spoken aloud, Night Viper. It was the call sign she had earned through blood, sweat, and loss. To them, it was just a name from a story. To her, it was a life she had buried. She quietly finished her work and left the hall without saying a word. That night, as she walked to her car under the dim parking lights, Maria thought about how strange fate could be. Here she was, sweeping the floors of the same kind of base she once commanded from above. The people she now served had no idea that she had once led missions that saved their predecessors. She smiled sadly. It didn't bother her, not really. She didn't need medals or recognition anymore. She had found peace in silence. But still, part of her missed it. The thrill of the mission, the unity of the team, the rush of being someone who mattered. She often caught herself standing still, listening to the sound of distant helicopters, her mind slipping back to the nights when she was Night Viper, moving through darkness, leading her squad through danger. She would close her eyes for a moment, take a deep breath, and remind herself where she was. That life was over. She was Maria Torres now, janitor, mother, survivor. Yet destiny has a way of finding those who try to hide from it. The whispers about her kept growing. Some were innocent curiosity. Others were teasing jokes. But all of them were slowly building up to a moment no one expected. One late evening, the base was preparing for a high-level visit. Everyone was nervous, running around to make things perfect. Maria stayed quiet, mopping the floor near the main briefing room as usual. She didn't know that the man visiting that night, Admiral Jacob Steele, one of the most respected SEAL commanders, would soon be the one to uncover her secret. For now, she was just a quiet figure moving in the background, unseen yet unforgettable. The sailors still whispered and wondered, unaware that the truth about Maria Torres would soon shake the entire base, and leave even the Admiral himself speechless. The day Admiral Jacob Steele arrived at the Navy training base was unlike any other. Everyone was on edge. The Admiral was known across the Navy as one of the toughest SEAL commanders alive, sharp, strict, and fearless. He had led missions in some of the most dangerous places in the world. Soldiers said that even when bullets flew around him, he never lost his calm. His name alone made young recruits stand straighter. The base had been preparing for his visit for days. Officers were busy polishing their boots, fixing every little mistake, and making sure everything looked perfect. The hallways were cleaner than ever. The flags hung perfectly straight, and not a single piece of trash was left on the ground. Everyone wanted to impress him, or at least avoid his sharp criticism. Maria Torres, as always, was working quietly in the background. She didn't care much for big names or titles anymore. To her, the Admiral was just another high-ranking officer passing through. She was focused on her usual routine, mopping the floors, dusting tables, and making sure the base was spotless before the inspection began. Her calmness stood out while everyone else rushed around nervously. By evening, the Admiral's car finally arrived. The echo of boots, salutes, and loud greetings filled the air. Admiral Steele stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, with a firm expression that made even senior officers tense up. His sharp blue eyes scanned everything, missing nothing. When he walked into a room, it felt like the temperature dropped. He was that kind of man, someone who carried power effortlessly. As he began his inspection, Maria was cleaning a corner of the command building. She could hear his deep voice giving instructions, asking questions, and testing the officer's knowledge. Every few minutes, laughter would break out when he made a quick joke. He had a rough sense of humor that everyone tried to laugh at, even if they didn't find it funny. When the inspection reached Maria's hallway, she quietly stepped aside to let the officers pass. Her mop was still in her hand, and she kept her eyes down out of respect. But the Admiral noticed her. Maybe it was her posture, maybe the way she moved, smooth, disciplined, not like an ordinary worker. Something about her seemed familiar. He stopped walking and turned toward her. "And who might you be?" he asked, his tone firm but curious. Maria looked up politely. "Maria Torres, sir. I handle the cleaning and maintenance here." He nodded, half smiling. "Ah, the one keeping this place running, huh? Good job." The officers standing nearby chuckled softly. The Admiral looked around and then back at her. His sharp eyes twinkled with amusement. "Tell me, Miss Torres," he said in a teasing tone. "What's your call sign?" The question hung in the air. It was clearly meant as a joke. Call signs were for soldiers, not janitors. A few of the younger officers laughed under their breath. They expected Maria to blush or giggle and brush it off. But she didn't. For a moment, Maria just looked at the Admiral. There was something calm yet strong in her eyes. She set the mop aside slowly, straightened her back, and replied softly, "Night Viper, sir." The laughter stopped instantly. The hallway went dead silent. The Admiral's smile faded. His eyes widened slightly, and the air seemed to grow heavier. The officers looked around in confusion. They didn't understand why the Admiral suddenly looked stunned. "Excuse me?" he said after a pause. "What did you just say?" Maria met his gaze without fear. "Night Viper, sir," she repeated, her voice steady. The name echoed in his mind like a thunderclap. He had heard that call sign before years ago in classified mission briefings, in after-action reports, in whispered stories between SEAL teams. Night Viper wasn't just a name. It was a legend. A soldier known for her unmatched stealth, precision, and courage. A hero who had saved lives on missions that were considered impossible. But Night Viper had been listed as killed in action many years ago. The Admiral blinked, as if trying to process what he was hearing. "Night Viper," he repeated under his breath. He remembered a mission in the Middle East, one that had almost gone wrong until a lone operative led a rescue through enemy territory at night. That operative's call sign had been Night Viper. Everyone thought she died during an explosion after getting her team to safety. Now here she was, standing right in front of him, holding a mop, wearing a janitor's uniform. The Admiral stared at her for a long moment, his mind racing. Could it really be her? The same woman who had once been one of the Navy's finest operatives? She looked older now, yes, her hair pulled back, her face calm and worn by time. But the sharpness in her eyes was the same. The discipline in her stance, the confidence in her voice. It all matched. None of the officers dared to speak. They looked at the Admiral, waiting for him to respond. He finally cleared his throat and said quietly, "That's quite a call sign." Maria simply nodded and went back to her work as if nothing had happened. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. She dipped her mop into the bucket and continued cleaning the floor, her movements calm and steady. But the Admiral couldn't take his eyes off her. He knew there was more to this woman than anyone realized. As he continued his inspection, his mind wasn't on the reports anymore. He kept thinking about that name, Night Viper. Could the military have been wrong? Could this quiet janitor really be the same person from those classified missions? The idea seemed impossible, yet every instinct told him it was true. When the visit ended later that night, Admiral Steele stood outside, looking up at the stars for a moment. The sound of the ocean waves in the distance reminded him of the missions long past, missions where legends like Night Viper had made the difference between life and death. He had come to the base expecting just another routine inspection. Instead, he had stumbled upon a mystery that shook even his iron composure. Inside the building, Maria finished her shift quietly, her face calm as always. But deep inside, she knew the moment she said that name, her old call sign, everything was about to change. The past she had hidden for years was knocking on her door once again. The silence after Maria said her call sign felt heavy, almost unreal. Everyone in the hallway froze, waiting for someone to laugh or say something. But no one did. The joke that had started the moment, the Admiral's light teasing, suddenly felt like a mistake. Even the young officers who had been grinning awkwardly stopped smiling. The air was still, and the only sound was the faint hum of the overhead lights. Maria didn't seem bothered. She stood there calmly, her expression quiet and unreadable. Her eyes didn't challenge the Admiral, but they didn't lower in submission either. She just waited, her hands resting lightly on the mop handle. Her posture was relaxed, but there was something powerful about it, the kind of silent confidence that didn't need words. Admiral Steele's lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to ask her to repeat what she said. But he already knew he had heard her right. Night Viper. The name echoed in his mind, bringing back memories he hadn't thought about in years. He felt a chill crawl down his spine. He remembered mission briefings, radio transmissions, and stories whispered between elite teams. That name, Night Viper, was not one any SEAL would forget. A few of the officers glanced nervously at the Admiral. They didn't understand why he looked so pale. To them, it was just a strange moment. A janitor giving herself a dramatic-sounding nickname. But to Admiral Steele it was something else entirely. He had seen the name Night Viper written in red ink across mission files labeled top secret. He had seen it on reports that described impossible rescues, covert operations, and last-minute extractions under heavy fire. Whoever Night Viper was, she had been one of the best. And the last time her name appeared in military records, it was next to 3 haunting letters, Kia, killed in action. "Where did you hear that name?" the Admiral finally asked, his voice quieter now, more serious. Maria looked at him and said softly, "It's mine, sir." The simple answer hit him harder than any explosion. He studied her face, the calm eyes, the faint scar near her temple, the way she stood with perfect balance. Every detail matched what he remembered from old mission photos. He couldn't believe it. Could this really be her? The Navy had believed she was dead. He took a slow step forward, searching for words. "You're her?" he asked, as if saying it aloud would make it real. Maria gave a small smile, the kind that carried both pride and pain. "I used to be," she replied quietly. "A long time ago." The Admiral didn't know what to say. For a few seconds, he just stared at her, his mind racing through years of missions and faces. The officers around him shifted awkwardly, unsure if they should stay or leave. Finally, he lifted a hand slightly, signaling them to move along. "Give us a moment," he said firmly. They nodded quickly and walked away, their footsteps fading down the corridor. When they were alone, he turned back to her. "You were declared dead," he said in disbelief. Maria nodded slowly. "That's what they told everyone." "Why didn't you come back?" he asked. "The Navy thought you were gone. Your team, they talked about you for years. You saved them all." Maria's eyes softened. "I lost too much, sir," she said quietly. "My husband died on that last mission. I barely made it out alive. I decided to disappear, to raise my son away from that world. I didn't want him growing up with the same ghosts." The Admiral felt a tightness in his chest. He remembered hearing about that mission, how a covert team had been surrounded in enemy territory and saved by a single operative who led them through the night under heavy fire. That operative was Night Viper. The rescue had become legend, but the woman behind it had vanished. And now, all these years later, she was standing in front of him in a janitor's uniform, holding a mop instead of a rifle. He looked at her differently now. The calm, quiet woman everyone ignored wasn't just some worker keeping the floors clean. She was a hero, one whose name had been spoken with respect by soldiers across the Navy. He realized how cruel his little joke must have sounded now. He had laughed, not knowing who she was. Maria could see the change in his face, the guilt, the surprise, the respect. She didn't blame him. People forgot quickly in the military world. New names replaced the old ones. New heroes rose and faded away. She had chosen to leave that life behind, and this was the price, to be forgotten. The Admiral cleared his throat and straightened his shoulders, trying to regain his composure. "Miss Torres," he said respectfully, "if what you're saying is true, then I owe you, we all owe you, a great deal." She shook her head gently. "You don't owe me anything, sir. I did my duty. That's all." He studied her for another long moment. There was no pride or bitterness in her tone, only peace. He could tell she had made her peace with the past. But still, he couldn't help feeling humbled. After a few seconds, Maria quietly picked up her bucket and mop. "If you'll excuse me, sir," she said softly. "I still have a few more hauls to finish." The Admiral stepped aside, watching her walk away. The sound of the mop wheels against the floor echoed faintly down the corridor. He had commanded hundreds of men, faced enemies, and made life-or-death decisions. But that night, something about this simple moment stayed with him. He realized that true strength didn't always come with medals, uniforms, or salutes. Sometimes, it came from people who chose silence over glory, humility over recognition. As Maria disappeared around the corner, Admiral Steele whispered under his breath, "Night Viper." It sounded less like a name and more like a memory coming back to life. He knew this night would stay with him forever. What began as a harmless joke had turned into a moment of truth. A reminder that behind every quiet soul, there might be a story of courage no one ever expected. And for Admiral Steele, that realization hit harder than any mission he had ever faced. Admiral Steele couldn't get that name out of his mind, Night Viper. It echoed in his head long after Maria had walked away down the quiet hallway. He had heard that name many times before, but always in stories told by old teammates, always connected with bravery, danger, and sacrifice. Now that he had seen the woman behind it, he couldn't shake the disbelief that she was alive, and working here, cleaning the very floors soldiers marched on every day. That night, after finishing the inspection, the Admiral sat in his quarters, staring at his computer screen. He typed the name Night Viper into the secure military database. For a moment, nothing came up. Then the classified file appeared, locked behind multiple security layers. He had the clearance to open it. When he did, the screen filled with mission records, photos, and reports. He read through them carefully. Every line brought back old memories. Daring nighttime extractions, long-distance rescue missions, covert operations deep in enemy territory. Each time, the same call sign appeared, Night Viper. Her name wasn't written anywhere, just that call sign and a short description. Special Operations Support Operative, female, status, Kia. The Admiral leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. They thought she died, he whispered to himself. He rubbed his forehead and thought about the quiet woman with tired eyes and steady hands. He had teased her like she was nobody, and yet, she had once been one of the best operatives alive. He remembered one mission in particular, a story passed down in SEAL briefings. A team of 12 men had been trapped behind enemy lines after an ambush. They were surrounded, running out of ammunition, and cut off from communication. According to the survivors, a single operative had found them in the darkness, guiding them through a maze of enemy patrols to safety. That operative was Night Viper. They said she moved like a ghost. Unseen, silent, fearless. She didn't just save the team. She stayed behind to cover their escape. An explosion was heard moments later, and no one saw her again. She was declared dead the next morning. Admiral Steele closed the file and sat in silence. The truth was clear now. Maria Torres hadn't died that night. She had simply disappeared. Maybe she had wanted to. Maybe losing her husband in the same operation had broken something inside her. He could only imagine the pain of surviving what she had survived. The next morning, the Admiral called in one of his trusted officers, Lieutenant Harris. "I want you to check something quietly," he said. "A woman named Maria Torres works on base as a janitor. I need to know how long she's been here and what her background says." Harris looked confused. "A janitor, sir?" "Yes," the Admiral said sharply. "Just do it." A few hours later, Harris returned with the report. "Sir, she's been here for 2 years. Civilian hire. Background check shows minimal details. But there's something odd. Her file has a locked section that only top security can access. It's empty to us, but it means she's classified at some level." The Admiral nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." He dismissed Harris and sat quietly, thinking. It all made sense now. The way she moved, her calmness under pressure, the discipline in her every gesture. She wasn't just a janitor trying to survive. She was a soldier hiding in plain sight. That evening he saw her again. Maria was cleaning near the training room when he walked in. She looked up briefly, then went back to her work, as if nothing unusual had happened between them the night before. "Miss Torres," he said, his voice softer this time. "May I have a word?" She nodded, setting aside her mop. He gestured toward a quiet corner, and they stepped aside from the others. "I looked into your record," he began carefully. "I hope you don't mind." She smiled faintly. "I knew you would." "Why didn't you ever come back?" he asked. "You were one of the best." The Navy could have used you. Maria's eyes softened, her voice calm but filled with emotion. Because I already gave the Navy everything it asked for, sir, my strength, my loyalty, and the man I loved. When he died, there was nothing left of me to give. I made a choice to walk away. My son needed a mother, not a soldier. Her words hit him like a punch. He understood her perfectly. So many in the service never got that choice, to leave before the job took everything. But she had. And even now, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who didn't regret her decision. You could have taken a different job, the Admiral said softly. Why come back here, to this base? She looked around at the walls, the halls echoing with the sound of boots and commands. This place reminds me of who I was, she said, and who I can never be again. But it's peaceful. I can still serve in my own way. The Admiral nodded slowly. He was deeply moved. He saw now that the woman standing before him had more courage than most soldiers he'd ever led. She had walked away from glory to protect her child, and she had lived quietly, expecting nothing in return. As they spoke, a few young sailors walked by, giving Maria a polite nod. They didn't know who she truly was. To them, she was still just the janitor. The Admiral felt a sense of guilt rise inside him. He had spent years teaching his men that heroes wore medals and stood on stages, but now he saw that sometimes the greatest heroes were the ones who asked for nothing at all. When their conversation ended, he looked at her one last time. Night Viper, he said quietly. The Navy may have forgotten, but I won't. Maria smiled softly. Please, sir. Just Maria. He watched her walk away again, pushing her cleaning cart down the corridor. For a long time he stood there, lost in thought. He realized that the woman everyone ignored had once carried the weight of an entire team's survival on her shoulders. She had faced death, lost everything, and still chosen kindness and peace. That night, Admiral Steele couldn't sleep. The face of the quiet janitor haunted him. Not because she was a ghost from the past, but because she reminded him what real honor looked like. It wasn't in rank, medals, or fame. It was in sacrifice, humility, and the ability to keep going when the world stops seeing you. And as the moonlight spilled over the base, he made a silent promise to himself. This story, her story, would not remain hidden any longer. The next few days passed quietly on the base, but Admiral Steele's mind was far from calm. Every time he saw Maria, sweeping the floors or carrying her bucket through the long corridors, he felt a deep respect mixed with guilt. He had once mocked her, not knowing the truth of who she really was. Now, he couldn't help but notice how others around her still treated her like she was invisible. Soldiers walked past her without a glance. Officers barely nodded. None of them knew that the woman they ignored had saved more lives than most of them ever would. One afternoon, as the Admiral was heading to a strategy meeting, he saw something that made him stop. Near the entrance to the mess hall, a group of young recruits were laughing loudly. Maria was there too, trying to clean a coffee spill. One of the recruits accidentally kicked her bucket, spilling water across the floor. Instead of helping, they laughed. "Careful there, ma'am," one of them said sarcastically. "Wouldn't want to lose your mop." Maria didn't reply. She simply wiped the water and continued her work, calm and silent. But the Admiral saw the whole thing. His jaw tightened, and his steps grew heavy as he walked toward them. The moment the recruits saw him, their laughter died instantly. "At ease," the Admiral said coldly, his eyes fixed on them. "Do you find something funny about someone doing an honest job?" "And no, sir," one stammered. "Good," he replied, "because the person you just mocked has done more for this country than any of you have yet. You owe her more respect than you'll ever understand." The recruits looked stunned. They didn't know what to say. The Admiral gave them one last hard look and walked away. But as he passed Maria, he noticed her expression. Calm, but her eyes said thank you. She didn't need anyone to defend her, but it touched her heart that someone finally did. That evening, Admiral Steele couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. It wasn't just about respect. It was about recognition. The truth that someone who had given her life to the Navy was now living in the shadows. He wanted to change that. Later that night, He opened his laptop and began writing an internal report. It was not an official order, but a personal letter addressed to the Naval Command. In it, he explained how one of the Navy's greatest operatives, codename Night Viper, was alive, living under a civilian identity. He described her acts of heroism, her sacrifice, and how she had saved countless lives. But he also wrote about her humility, how she had chosen a quiet life rather than fame or recognition. When he finished the letter, he sat back and hesitated. Would Maria even want this? He wasn't sure. Maybe she had her reasons for staying hidden. But his conscience wouldn't allow him to keep quiet. Heroes deserved to be remembered. The next morning, Maria was cleaning near the Admiral's office when she noticed his door open. "Miss Torres," he called. "Come in for a moment." She entered quietly, her cleaning cloth still in her hand. "I owe you an apology," the Admiral said, "for the way I spoke to you that first day. It was wrong, and I regret it deeply." Maria smiled softly. "You don't need to apologize, sir. People see what they want to see. You couldn't have known." "I know," he said, "but I should have respected you anyway." She looked down, then back at him. "You did today," she said. "That's what matters." There was a pause, a quiet understanding between them. Then he asked gently, "Why didn't you ever tell anyone who you were?" Maria sighed. "Because that part of my life is over, Admiral. I spent years living in the shadows, fighting battles no one saw. When my husband died, I promised myself I'd never bring that darkness into my son's life. He thinks I work as a janitor, and that's enough. I want him to see his mother as someone who worked hard and stayed honest, not as someone who killed to survive." Her words were simple, but they carried more weight than any medal. The Admiral nodded slowly. "He must be proud of you." "He doesn't know," she said softly. "But one day, maybe he will." Just then, a call came through the base radio. A security drill gone wrong near the docks. A supply truck had caught fire, and several workers were trapped inside a nearby warehouse. Without thinking, Maria's instincts kicked in. "Sir, that area has fuel tanks nearby," she said quickly. "If it spreads, the whole dock could explode." The Admiral grabbed his radio, giving orders, but before he could stop her, Maria ran toward the danger. "Maria, wait!" he shouted, but she was already gone. When he reached the dock, flames were rising high, smoke filling the air. Soldiers were trying to control the fire, shouting orders, but Maria had already disappeared inside the burning warehouse. For a few tense minutes, everyone froze, until suddenly, through the smoke, she appeared again, dragging one man on her shoulder and guiding another with a limp. Her face was covered in soot, her arms shaking, but her movements were precise and steady, just like a trained operative. "Get them out!" she yelled. "The tanks are leaking." The Admiral rushed forward with medics, helping her pull the injured men to safety. Just moments later, a massive explosion shook the ground. If she had been inside just seconds longer, she would have been gone. When the fire finally died down, everyone stared at her in awe. The same recruits who had laughed at her earlier now stood silent, eyes wide. They had just seen her do something none of them had the courage to attempt. The Admiral approached her carefully. "You just saved 5 lives, Maria." She shrugged, exhausted. "Old habits," she said quietly. That moment changed everything. From that day on, the story of the mysterious janitor spread through the base. No one knew her past, but they all knew her courage. The Admiral stood by his office window that night, watching the fire crews finish their work. He smiled faintly, whispering to himself, "Night Viper, you never stopped being a hero." And somewhere across the base, Maria sat alone in the quiet, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at an old photo tucked inside her wallet, her husband in uniform smiling beside her. She whispered softly, "I told you I was done fighting, but maybe just one more time was worth it." The next morning, the entire base was buzzing with talk about the fire at the docks. Everyone was saying the same thing. A janitor had run into the flames and saved 5 people before the explosion. No one could believe it. Soldiers, officers, Even senior staff were trying to figure out how someone without any training could stay so calm under pressure and act with such precision. Admiral Steele, however, already knew the truth. He watched the base come alive with rumors while he quietly observed Maria from his office window. She was back at work like nothing had happened. Mopping floors, cleaning hallways, and keeping to herself. There was no pride in her expression, no need for recognition. It was as if saving lives was just another part of her day. That quiet humility made him respect her even more. But now things had changed. The higher command had noticed the report of her heroism. Calls were coming in from the regional headquarters, asking for details about the civilian worker who had risked her life. The Admiral knew this meant attention, and attention was the last thing Maria wanted. Later that afternoon, he called her into his office. She entered, still in her janitor uniform, her hands folded neatly in front of her. "You've caused quite a stir," he said with a small smile. She looked confused. "I didn't mean to, sir." "I know," he said softly. "But the Navy doesn't ignore acts of bravery. The regional commander wants to meet the civilian who saved his men." Maria's face changed instantly. She shook her head. "No, sir. Please. I don't want that." The Admiral leaned forward. "Maria, they'll want to thank you. You risked your life. You deserve it." Her eyes filled with quiet fear. "You don't understand. If they look too closely, they'll find out who I really am. I don't want that, Admiral. I left that life behind for a reason." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, I'll handle it. But you can't stay invisible forever, Maria. The truth has a way of coming out." She smiled faintly. "Then I'll deal with it when it does." Over the next few days, the fire incident made its way into the local military news. They didn't use her name, only referring to her as an unnamed civilian worker. But the story reached far and wide. People admired the mysterious woman's courage, though no one knew her past. One evening, as the Admiral was preparing to leave, a visitor arrived on the base, a middle-aged man in uniform wearing several medals. His face was stern, his eyes sharp. "Commander Briggs," the Admiral said in surprise. "I didn't expect you here." "I'm here about the woman," Briggs said. "The one they're calling the Doc Hero." The Admiral's chest tightened. "What about her?" Briggs placed a tablet on the desk showing a photo from years ago. A mission team smiling after a successful extraction. Among them was a younger Maria Torres, dressed in tactical gear, her call sign Night Viper stitched on her arm. "I knew it," Briggs said quietly. "I thought she was dead. But she's alive, and working here." "Yes," the Admiral admitted. "She's been living a quiet life. She doesn't want attention." Briggs sighed heavily. "She was one of the best. We lost good men that night, but she saved the rest of us. I owe her my life." The Admiral looked at him carefully. "Then you understand why she wants to stay hidden. Let her have her peace." Briggs hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right, but she deserves recognition, Admiral. The Navy should know what she did, and what she's still capable of." After Briggs left, the Admiral sat in silence, staring at Maria's old photo on the screen. She looked different then, younger, fierce, unstoppable. But her eyes were the same, calm, determined. That night, as the sun dipped below the ocean and the base lights flickered on, the Admiral decided to speak with Maria once more. He found her near the supply room, putting away cleaning equipment. "Maria," he said quietly, "someone came to see me today. Commander Briggs." Her hands froze. "Briggs?" she whispered. "He's alive." "Yes. He recognized you right away." She sighed deeply, leaning against the wall. "I thought everyone from that mission was gone. I never wanted them to know I survived." "Why?" he asked softly. "They were your team." "Because," she said slowly, her voice trembling, "if they knew I was alive, they'd ask why I didn't come back. And I can't answer that without breaking again." The Admiral's heart ached hearing those words. She wasn't running from duty. She was running from pain. He spoke gently. "Briggs doesn't want to expose you. He just wanted to say thank you. You saved him." Maria smiled sadly. Then that's enough. I don't need the world to know. Just knowing one person remembers, that's enough. They stood there in silence for a while, the hum of the night filling the air. Finally, the Admiral said, "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were just another quiet worker trying to make ends meet. But now I see. You're the kind of person who keeps this country standing, even when no one sees it." Maria looked down, her voice soft. "Heroes don't need medals, Admiral. They just need peace." The next morning, something unexpected happened. The recruits who had mocked her earlier gathered near the mess hall with a small bouquet of flowers and a handmade card that said thank you. When Maria walked by, they straightened up and saluted her. She froze, unsure what to do. One of the young men said shyly, "Ma'am, we just wanted to say we're sorry, and that you're amazing." Maria smiled. A small, warm smile that touched everyone there. "Thank you," she said simply. From that day on, no one on the base treated her like just a janitor again. People greeted her with respect, and even officers stepped aside politely when she passed. They didn't know her full story, but they knew she was someone extraordinary. The Admiral watched this quiet change unfold and felt a deep satisfaction. Maria didn't need fame or medals. She had something much greater, honor, earned through action, not words. That night, as he looked out across the dark base, the Admiral whispered to himself, "The Navy didn't find Night Viper again, but she never really left." And somewhere, sitting in her small room, Maria held her son's photo close and smiled softly. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. The ghosts of her past were finally quiet, and she could finally breathe again. A few weeks had passed since the fire at the docks, and life on the base slowly returned to normal. But something had changed, not in the routines or the rules, but in the hearts of the people who worked there. Everyone now looked at Maria differently. The woman they once overlooked was now treated with quiet respect. No one dared make jokes or ignore her presence anymore. Even the youngest recruits greeted her politely when they passed her in the hallway. Maria noticed the change but never acted like it mattered. She still wore her plain uniform, carried her old mop bucket, and did her work without complaint. Yet, deep down, something inside her had begun to heal. For years, she had lived hiding from her past. From the soldier she once was, from the pain of losing her husband, from the life she thought she could never face again. But now, she realized that maybe she hadn't lost everything. Maybe she had only been waiting for the right moment to find herself again. Admiral Steele, too, had changed. He often found himself thinking about her, not out of guilt anymore, but out of admiration. He saw how she inspired others just by being herself. Without giving speeches or wearing medals, she had taught everyone around her a lesson about true strength and humility. One morning, the Admiral received a message from Naval Command. They were holding an annual ceremony to honor acts of bravery, and word about the civilian hero at the dock had reached high command. They wanted Maria Torres to attend, to be recognized for her courage. The Admiral hesitated. He knew this would expose her, and she didn't want that. Still, he decided to talk to her. Later that day, he found her in the hangar, wiping down the floor. "Maria," he said gently, "there's something I need to tell you." She looked up, surprised by his serious tone. "What is it, sir?" "The Navy wants to honor you. They know what you did at the docks. The ceremony is next week." Maria froze, her eyes widening slightly. "No, I can't." "I knew you'd say that," the Admiral said softly. "But listen, this isn't about medals or fame. It's about truth. You've spent years hiding, but you didn't deserve to disappear. You saved lives again, and the world should know." Maria shook her head, her voice low. "If they call my name, they'll dig into who I am. I don't want my son to find out that his mother was part of missions no one talks about. He thinks I'm just an ordinary worker, and I want to keep it that way." The Admiral's voice softened even more. "Maybe one day he'll find out on his own. And when he does, he won't see a soldier who hid her past. He'll see a mother who was brave enough to protect both her country and her child." She stood quietly for a moment, thinking. Then she sighed deeply. "All right," she said. "If this will make things right, I'll go. But I don't want any special attention. The Admiral smiled. Understood. When the day of the ceremony arrived, the entire base gathered in the main hall. Flags lined the walls, and officers stood in their formal uniforms. Maria felt out of place in her simple clothes, but the Admiral had insisted she come. She sat quietly in the back, hoping no one would notice her. When the ceremony began, several soldiers were honored for their service. Then the Admiral stepped up to the microphone. His voice was calm but carried power through the hall. "Today," he began, "we honor those who serve with courage. But sometimes, real heroes wear no medals and hold no ranks. Sometimes, they walk among us quietly, doing their duty without seeking praise." The crowd listened closely as he continued. Some weeks ago, during the dock fire, a civilian worker risked her life to save others. She ran into the flames without hesitation and pulled men out moments before an explosion. Her bravery saved lives that day. She did it not because she had to, but because that's who she is. He paused, his eyes meeting Maria's across the hall. Her name is Maria Torres, but some of us remember her by another name, Night Viper. A shocked murmur spread through the crowd. Every officer in the room knew that name, the legendary operative who had disappeared years ago. All eyes turned toward Maria as she stood slowly, unsure what to do. The Admiral motioned for her to come forward. As she walked down the aisle, silence filled the hall. No one spoke, but everyone's eyes were full of awe and respect. When she reached the stage, the Admiral stepped aside and saluted her, not as a superior to a subordinate, but as a soldier to another soldier. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the medal, though she hadn't asked for it. The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time in many years, Maria didn't feel like she was hiding anymore. She stood tall, her eyes filled with quiet pride, not for herself, but for the memory of her husband and the soldiers she had once fought beside. After the ceremony, the Admiral found her standing alone outside, looking at the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky gold. "You did well," he said. She smiled faintly. "I didn't do it for the medal." "I know," he said. "You did it because that's who you are." She nodded. "Maybe I needed this. Not for recognition, but to finally stop running from who I was." The Admiral looked at her kindly. "So what will you do now?" Maria thought for a moment, then said softly, "Keep working, keep living, and maybe, finally, start teaching my son a bit about courage. Not the kind that fights wars, but the kind that helps people even when no one's watching." He smiled. "He's lucky to have you." As she walked away, the Admiral watched her, the woman who had once been a ghost of the past, now standing tall in the present. The legend of Night Viper had returned, not as a warrior, but as a symbol of quiet strength and redemption. That night, in her small home, Maria sat beside her son as he did his homework. On the table beside them lay the medal she had received. Her son noticed it and asked curiously, "Mom, what's that?" She smiled, touching it gently. "Just something from work," she said softly. He grinned. "You're pretty amazing, Mom." Maria looked at him, her heart full. "No, sweetheart," she said. "I just try to do what's right." And for the first time in years, she felt at peace. Not because her past had been erased, but because she had finally embraced it. The name Night Viper no longer haunted her. It reminded her of the woman she had always been, brave, strong, and full of quiet grace.